Okay, guys, so this is the third session of the Arts Education Archive Malaysia program, but chronologically, it's the second program of actually what we have in the archive. So this is the Seni Kreatif program, which was run in USM Penang, hosted in USM Penang from 1986 to 1991. Janet, you had come back from doing your master's in Hawaii, actually, at this point. I think it was the first master's in children's theatre in the country. And you had begun working with Sugu Kingdom, who's a visual artist. Can you talk a little bit about this notion of integrated arts that you and him began to develop? You had been doing it kind of in theatre kanak-kanak, but maybe without formally calling it that or systematizing it. So can you talk about how this then started up in Penang after you came back?
Okay, first I want to say that having a master's in children's theatre was quite a disappointment. Because I did it in a Western country and it was nothing like what we had already done in reality. I mean, what we had already experienced in Malaysia without any training. So I brought back almost nothing from my children's theatre master's back to USM, except to get a job with the masters. So that was quite interesting. So I immediately fell back into the idea of, how do you say, working with visual artists or working with musicians, etc. So the only person who was available at that time who was interested in educational art was this Sugu Kingham, who had been a teacher, art teacher in school for many years, and who actually came from that very strong tradition of pedagogical art training from, what is it called? The teacher training college, the specialist.
Sultan Idris,
Specialist teacher training college. And he was definitely of that ilk lah. And he had come to do his maybe BA, not an MA. I think he was actually going through a degree program in USM. And so we got together and yeah, we applied and for a $1,000 grant or something from the faculty. And we put it out as a kind of a CSR activity within Pusat Seni. And yeah, so the dean said, go ahead. And then we started planning our lessons. So there are lesson plans that most of the lesson plans look like a struggle of how we would integrate a visual instructor with a drama instructor. And it ran in 3 phases.
Right.
So the first phase was very integrated arts, very much in the open. He really believed in learning from life. So, you know, it was, I would say, predominantly field trips and less classroom type stuff.
Okay. So Janet, I mean, just so that we can have a little bit of clarity, like, so then what do you think was the distinction between the way of working with Sugu and your previous collaborators, you know, your Marians, your Elizabeth Cardosas, and so on and so forth? So what was beginning to be more formalized or became syllabus, if I can call it, or lesson plans?
We had no intention of having outputs. So it was basically arts education. And also the word theatre was never used. Okay. So it was really arts education. So, and also, so there was no intention to work towards a production. There was no, until we came to the third phase. So we had 4 phases and Zamzam was the 3rd phase. Then we reintroduced the whole KL way of working, which is take a script, use it as the core to, how do you say, wrap our classes around that script. Right. But we were still doing arts education, but towards a product. But the first 2 were completely no product. Yeah.
And Adela, I mean, how did you come into this project? I mean, you come into its 3rd kind of iteration already. How did you get involved?
Yeah, actually it was purely accidental somehow. I can't quite remember how it came about, but it was something along the lines of, I think we were hanging out with Sugu, because my dad was a colleague. I mean, he taught in USM as well, and I knew Sugu even before I got involved in theatre, because he was actually quite known in this children's program called Chumi and Chiki. He was known as Abang Joe. And he did, yeah, people in our generation would know. It was a well-known TV show, RTM 1 or 2, and he did the craft section. So I kind of knew Sugu already, and I think we were just hanging out, and I think Janet was there and had this flash, like, let's do a play for my dad's exhibition opening, and she quickly came up with this script, and I think Sui Beng came up with some tunes, some drums.
Was there music in this performance?
There was
I don't
some
remember
drumming.
music.
Yeah, there was some drumming, but it was not. I think we refined it after that. That was just a whole experiment that we did, and it was just a sort of, I think it was about 15 minutes vignette kind of thing. So it wasn't. I think you came out with a proper script after that. I think so.
Actually,
So
Just a question:
that's
was
how
this
it
was
came
this
about.
Zamzam or was this?
Zamzam.
This is
was
Zamzam.
This is Zamzam. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
But Sugu had been working with 2 sets of children, and the same thing happened as in KL. That means some of the children filtered from program 1 to program 2, and then very few. I think in this third program, maybe 6 or 7 children filtered into it.
Yes, eventually.
One of them was her brother.
Yes,
But she's not aware of that.
No, it's kind of funny because I guess because I had to play so many roles, and Sugu was handling like there was like the set gang, and the supporting roles, and then there was me because I was under so much pressure, you know.
As a solo performer,
I
because
mean,
this was
yeah,
a
I
monologue.
mean, you know, so I kind of see them around, but then my brother's like much quieter than me, and you know, he kind of felt he was forced into it in the first place. That was totally out of his comfort zone as well. So, but eventually, you know, it all came together. But they were mostly with Sugu, kind of creating things, and actually we would come together at the beginning or at the end of rehearsal to discuss, okay, what have you come up with? What have we come up with? And then we'd rehearse together towards the end.
Can I just ask? I mean, like, because this is quite unique. I was just informed before this that Zamzam may have been the first modern children's theatre monologue solo performance by you. This is unique partly because, like, in children's theatre, you weren't working with other children. So what were rehearsals
wasn't.
like? What was the process like? How did you guys rehearse? You know, you were 15. You were a bit older. I mean, how did you guys work on this? What was the process?
I guess it's the usual because I was listening in to the previous session. There are a lot of basic things that, you know, Janet would, you know, drum into us, like, you know, the breathing technique and using the diaphragm and all that. So I used to come to USM after school, you know, in my uniform and go to Panggung Sasaran and actually go through those motions. And then we would actually run through the script, and she would actually work on me most of the time one-on-one. It was a one-on-one training session and pretty intense most of the time. At the beginning, we spent some time in Georgetown exploring different characters before we kind of finalized how the script was to be read and explored and experimented with. You know, I was told to sort of observe this moneylender, you know, on India Street.
How many characters did you play, Adela? I mean, do you remember?
I was Zamzam, Zamzam's ill mum, dying mother, and the moneylender, sort of Penang Mama character who's a moneylender. Yeah.
So a lot of work was done in Georgetown with character observation, environmental observation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, because Sugu, I'll just talk on behalf of Sugu, because in the first program, we were equal. That means I was doing drama. I was a drama instructor. He was a visual arts instructor. But we worked with the same children, like maybe he for 2 hours and me for 2 hours once a week. In the second program, we moved into wayang kulit because the USM had built a new museum and they had pushed the whole wayang kulit, I don't know, the puppets, and they inherited a huge, thing. They even built a pangong inside the museum, which was weird. And the whole 6 months program was about wayang kulit and very traditional exposure to wayang kulit. So this was the third one. And for visual arts, he chose pen and ink drawing. And they would go out to town and observe all the scenes that were in the Indian short story. So Sugu had chosen the story actually. And he translated this Indian story into Bahasa, but it was very Bahasa Baku. And he was very clear that there were scenes of a moneylender's shop. And so he transcribed it in his mind to Georgetown, old Georgetown situation. And he introduced them to characters. So of course I had to, with Adela, I had to do the same thing lah. So we went a lot to town and observed characters.
Yeah. I somehow wasn't aware that the actual story was initiated by Sugu. Yeah, I wasn't, because I think when I got involved, there was already a rough script available, but we kind of like built on it a bit more. And then it also got changed when we introduced the music element, because actually it's not just a monologue, it was also a musical. It was a musical monologue.
I think you have to maybe demonstrate some of it.
Oh God, no. Yeah, because we actually had, the initial stages, we sat down with Sui Beng quite a bit to determine what kind of tune some of the, because before I got into character, there would be actually an introduction, what do you call it?
Musical
Yeah, because I was also the narrator. So the narration happened in a tune. So that was the musical bit before the acting bit happened.
What influences was the music pulling from? Was it
chanting, a sort of
It was
quite a traditional
gendang based. Yes, yeah. It was a particular tune. Yeah. So so that combined. So it was multi-dimensional in that sense. So it took a while for me to get my head wrapped around it. But it was an interesting, definitely an interesting and challenging part of my teenage years. And it got to a point where I was almost, when you get into something like theatre, especially in the way Janet teaches, it's very intense. And because of the kind of musical element to it, got to a point where I was almost kind of obsessed with it. You have to really get into it. Because, also I was also quite a shy person before, so it was really totally out of my comfort zone. So I had to get over this sort of fear. First of all, and also there's no stage. You can't hide behind anything with Janet's style of theatre, So our first public performance was actually at I think a low-cost housing estate
it was in
Tanjung Tok Kong, amidst a group of underprivileged kids. And they had such a good time. I was I was super scared, but then when we got going, because there was a lot of interactive elements within the play, etc. I kind of built my own confidence because of this genuine interaction and the kind of genuine responses that you get. So that was actually quite amazing to me, because after rehearsing intensely with just our group and not having this kind of engagement, it was quite amazing
to finally meet an audience, because it's just been you and internally with the group.
And not actually just performing to someone. It's actually sort of having this engagement. and also having engagement with people who genuinely enjoyed it.
Can I just ask Janet, because like what did you learn from this process? Because working with a solo performer, which is something that you've barely ever done before or since, um, it sounds like it was a very exciting, interesting process, but also like it was a big burden as well. I mean, as a director, as an educator, Zamzam seems quite unique in the scope of project that you've done. What did you learn from this?
Okay. First, I must say I was very excited about the visual arts aspect because this was a group of very young boys who were like 13 and 14 years old, and they produced the poster, the program booklet, hand done, and the hand drawn, yeah. And the first set of 2D, the first sets were 2D line drawing, and then after 4 months they converted it into 3D sets. So the second tour that we did was actually with 3D sets. I don't know how we carried it around Penang because we went
They
north,
were
south,
like
east,
flat
west.
packs.
Oh, yeah. And there was an exhibition of the whole visual arts process that toured with the performance. And Sugu was very particular about showing the process in the exhibition. So it was all the children's work and how it finally led to this set. Costumes were also designed by them, very, very detailed observation of real life, and then trying out the costumes for her, etc. So she had 3 sets. I mean, one set of costumes that I don't know how she did it, but she manipulated one set of costume for 3 characters. But it was easy to direct Adela because she, like her father, is actually what you call people who imitate other people.
Mimic.
Yeah, she's an amazing mimic. So she just when we did
I think
a
my
field,
dad, I got that from my dad somehow.
yeah, they're both quite frightening mimics. So when she goes to observe field work, she can just mimic the whole character, the vocals, the intonation, the dialect, everything. So actually it was quite exciting to see somebody. So I saw it from, how can people just mimic? So it's just putting together 3 mimics. I mean 3. So it's a very different approach to doing a monologue, right? Yeah.
But it wasn't that easy lah.
Yeah, I'm sure. Clearly not. Clearly not.
Honestly,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you can mimic, but mimicking is just, it's superficial. I didn't know how to carry myself, and I think that still took a lot of training by Janet, and the engaging with people and all that. But I think it's an amazing experience. I've always looked back at those 2 years of my life as being quite sort of self-defining because it's a period of your life where it's in between school and university. Really, it's actually it was actually very, very important for me to have this element as a kind of outlet because especially with our education system, which is very boom boom boom, and I was in the science stream, and it's all very heavy and regimented, and I think it's very important for kids at that age to be able to let it out, and also the fact that I was put in this non-comfort zone allowed me to sort of really force my self-confidence out there, and I think that really helped me in being a much more independent person after a much more independent creative person as well, because if things come from within you in an honest and open manner, it translates itself in a much richer, it shows, yeah.
Adela, I mean, today you work as an architect and also a designer. I mean, specifically in your work and your career now, are there any kind of practices or kind of ways of thinking or philosophies from being involved with Sugu and Janet and this program that kind of still shadows your work, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I actually think back like on my these theatre days with Janet, like quite often, like every you know, at least once a year, I'm like, oh, thank God I did theatre with Janet, you know, because it, you know, you have to sell your designs, and you know, even as a student, you know, you actually have to stand up and sort of defend your work. And you know, I think that it's not just with architects and designers, and in a lot of other professions. And that confidence and that communication skill is imperative for you to be successful in whatever you do. Communication
Yep.
is extremely important, and I think it's something that's completely underrated in this country. Because I interview a lot of interns and potential, you know, young
Yep.
architects, and it's something that they are sorely missing in a lot of young graduates today. And I'm very, very grateful that, you know, I was forced to do this, to go out there, because that just completely boosted my confidence
Right.
and my communication skills.
Right. Great, thank you. Janet, I have one final question for you. Sorry, do you have a question for Adela?
No, actually, I want to just comment. Zamzam was the only children's theatre performance which I felt was not a. I felt it was an adult performance.
How so?
That means it never occurred to me that it was a children's performance. Yeah, because she was very, how do you say? What's the word? The,
Virtuosic?
yeah, the discipline of performing was so
Hi.
high that you don't view it as a children's performance. So it's very strange. I mean, it was the only one where I had that feeling.
Also, the theme was quite serious. The theme was, well, Zamzam had a, you know, it's actually a bit it's quite depressing. The mother's dying, and then you know, he went out to try and find some way of actually getting some money so that he can take the mother to the hospital, and found this money lender, and found this ring, and tried to get, you know, money from this money lender, etc., etc. So the premise is actually quite sober, yeah, a bit grim, yeah.
And it's a bit of a scary performance because it's a child performing in a quite entertaining but very whatever way. But in the story is about how the adult is trying to he manipulates the child, and then the child is unable to get the money.
Right.
You know, I
Yeah.
mean, it's a long story. We won't go into it.
Yep.
But
yep,
in the
yep, yep.
end, because of the determination of the child in the story, he decides to do something very condescending and buys this plastic ring of her and gives her cash. And she runs off, you know, with this money
Yeah.
after he has cheated her the first time.
Right.
And it's very weird to see a child playing the role of an adult who is condescending to a
To a
child.
child. Wow.
So it was a very bizarre
Yeah,
kind of scene.
yeah.
Maybe that's why I felt it wasn't, because she had to enter into an adult head and then come out as a child.
Yep. Final question, Janet. I'm just trying to make some connectivity or continuity between all these three different phases that we're talking about in KL right now. What did you take away, or what were some of the systems, I guess, that were being put in place in the USM Seni Kreatif program that you took back to KL, you know, for the Theatre Muda program, like that you, in your collaboration with Sugu and with at that time young people, children like Adela, you know, what were some of these things that then you began to clearly systematize?
I think working with Sugu, who was an educator who was used to doing lesson plans and planning things in a very school way. So I think that's what triggered the possibility of thinking about, oh, we should document Theatre Muda, and we should, you know. And also I think some of the lesson plans, what Marion called the training, lessons for training, actually came out of the Penang project. Like, how do you prepare art lessons with the visual artist or with the musician, you know. So it's like syllabus writing or whatever. So actually formal education had sort of seeped into, so KBN was the wildest, right? And this period with Sugu was
He was
actually
starting to structure it.
very formal,
Yeah.
very formal education because of his influence. And then maybe Tera Muda was a combination of KBN and the USM experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting thing for me to kind of observe that, because the move is from a national institution to a university to, well, non-profit or non-governmental organizations or collectives like Five Arts Center and eventually Arts at Penang. But in many ways, there was kind of more informality and kind of freedom, maybe, in the KBN osmosis era, moving to more structuring in a university because you were based there, and then eventually with Theatre Muda and now Arts at quite formalized systems of education. So the non-formal had actually become formal by the time that we arrive in 2017. Yeah.
And I wonder whether the boundaries that they talked about are still that open now. Yeah.
Cool. We'll stop there. Thank you very much. Thank you, Adela.
Thank
you, Janet.
you.